Welcome to Best in Class. I'm AJ Madden. Today, I'd like to welcome someone who's had a major positive impact on my life and career. My friend, mentor, coach, trusted advisor, teacher, Dr. Alan Weiss. Alan has been called the finest entrepreneurial coach in the world by Dr. Marshall Goldsmith. His past clients have included Merck, Hewlett Packard, GE, Mercedes-Benz, the Federal Reserve, the New York Times Corporation, Toyota, and over half of the Fortune 500 companies. Alan has a PhD in psychology, is an inductee into the Professional Speaking Hall of Fame, and the recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award of the American Press Institute. He has written over 500 articles and 60 books, including his bestseller, Million Dollar Consulting, now in its 30th year and sixth edition. His career has taken him to 60 countries and 49 states. Alan, welcome back to Best in Class.
Thanks, AJ. Good to be here.
Good to see you again, as always. So, Alan is the Michael Jordan of the consulting world, but Alan is also a world-class expert in three other very important areas. In my experience, those are breakthrough, career success, self-esteem, and living a good life. Now, Alan has an excellent new book out called The Seven Figure Consultant, which I highly recommend. So, in honor of that, the theme of today's conversation is 10 pieces of $100,000 advice from the Million Dollar Consultant. So, I've pulled out 10 of my all time favorite, what we call Alanisms, from the book and his work. These are short, punchy, often contrarian, bumper sticker statements that once you hear them, you will never forget them. And if you apply them, they will change your life. So the first Alanism I have is stop seeking affection and focus only on respect. Alan, can you talk about that for us?
Yeah, sure. And I'll specify here that we have not discussed these in advance. So this is an ad hoc conversation. If you want affection, get a dog. I have two dogs. But you're not in this business to gain friends. You're in this business to improve other people's business. So it's a win-win business relationship. The thing that I find hysterical about social media is people register their success in likes, not respect, in likes. Well, likes don't pay the mortgage, but people who respect you and give you business pay the mortgage. So my feeling is we have a limited amount of time. We have to market carefully and in a targeted manner. And we can't be vulnerable to, whether we're consulting or coaching or speaking, seeking the standing ovation, seeking the smile sheet with all tens. It's irrelevant. I'm often hired to piss people off. And as long as the buyer is happy, I'm happy. I don't really care if the audience is happy. I do care if the audience has been placed in an environment where they can learn or they can question and challenge. So I think we have to have our own objective straight, AJ.
Makes sense. How about in terms of leadership, affection, focusing on respect and not affection? How does that apply to leadership?
Well, if you want to be popular, fine, but that's not going to make you a good leader. Leaders have to make tough decisions. This whole thing about servant leadership, I find to be crap. And when people talk about humility, they don't understand. Humility is not demeaning yourself. Humility is understanding the worth of others. It's a very different dynamic from what you popularly hear. So if a leader wants to be popular, a leader probably won't make unpopular decisions. And that's what a leader is for. Tough love, tough decisions, fire someone, change course, admit mistakes. That's what the great leaders do. And I've seen a lot of them. I've also seen a lot of them who worry about surveys and they bring in companies to judge how well employees like them or customers like them. And usually the board is too smart for that because the board is not evaluating the leader based upon how many people send them letters of love.
Oh, well said. That's some of my favorite leadership advice on almost 200 episodes of this podcast. That was something special there. Here's a second Alanism. If you want to be someone, you have to start acting that way now. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, uh, there's a famous phrase, I forget who said this, but they said, I can't hear you because your behaviors are so loud. So you can't hear what they're saying because their behaviors are so loud. And this is the basis of cognitive dissonance. I would love to be that, but you're speaking and acting like you're this. So if you want to become a leader, if you want to become innovative, if you want to become someone who is seen as a thought leader in particular, you have to act the part. You can't say you're going to grow into it. You start acting the part now. And that means if you hear something you don't like, you confront it. You don't worry about being liked. You don't worry about being unpopular. You confront it. You don't have to do that in an ad hominem attack. You simply say, well, my experience is different. My experience is this. You don't say, well, you're a fool. So if you want to change, and we all have to change during our lifetimes, if you want to change and go from a scarcity mentality to an affluent mentality, an abundance mentality, then you have to start acting like someone who's abundant. I'm not just talking in terms of monetary value. I'm talking in terms of ideas, of generosity, of sharing, and so forth.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, beautiful explanation. Could you share with us a story about when you were fired and how you bought the $2,000 suit and flew first class? Because that was acting that way now. You didn't wait.
Well, that's right. When in 1985, I was fired by the multimillionaire who owned the consulting firm for which I was president. It was harsh. There wasn't much severance. He was a little bit delusional, in my opinion. But nonetheless, like a lot of us say, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. So my wife said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to go out on my own. No moron's ever going to fire me again, period." She says, "Well, all right, get serious." So I bought a $2,000 suit. Now, this is 1985, right? $2,000 suit. And I bought first class tickets to visit clients. There was no remote learning. Everything was on site. And I took limos. I had cars pick me up. I didn't rent a car or get in a cab. My wife said, we don't have that much money saved up. Is this wise? And I said, all I need is one sale to make up for this for, 2 years. Because I did not want to arrive at a prospect at a buyer's office, sweaty and rumpled or having gotten lost. I wanted to be as fresh and energetic as that person was, and I wanted to look the part. No frayed cuffs, no buttons missing. I wanted to look the part because people in power want to deal with other powerful people.
Well said. And was this just as much about self-esteem as practicality?
It was a result of self-esteem. My self-esteem is very high, and that's why firing didn't bother me. I think an important thing, you can add this to the Allenisms here. An important thing for your listeners is that ego and self-esteem are two entirely different things. So ego is external. You create this ego picture, this image, and this is how you want people to see you. And so you want them to see you in a certain way, and you do everything to bolster that image. Now, ego can be shattered. It can be frail. It can be fragile. Somebody comes along who's a bully, or somebody comes along with a better technology, or somebody just proves you're wrong. Esteem, however, is totally internal, and it's your self-worth. It's the fact that whether you're fired or not, you're still a worthy person. Somebody else can't affect that. And the problem with esteem is that you don't lose it because somebody smashes it. You lose it because you neglect it. And I never neglected it. And so, because I felt like a worthy person, I said I deserve to make this investment and do what I think is necessary to impress other people, that I'm a peer of theirs. And that's what you create. I don't go in spouting statistics. I don't go in spouting accomplishments that weren't really mine. I don't quote other people as though it were I. And, those are the plagiarists. Those are the people who are derivative, who have no original ideas. That's not what I did. But I went in on equal grounds to show I was a peer of the buyer.
So important. Third Alanism, when you speak with confidence, that's half the game.
Yeah, I think that today there are two things that are very important that tend to shock people, or they shouldn't. One is having that confidence, which is an esteem issue. Confidence is basically the belief you can help someone, irrespective of whether you've done that particular thing in the past. In other words, I can meet your expectations even though I've never worked with someone like you or in this market or under these conditions. That's confidence. But the other aspect along with that is speed. Speed today has become a premium. And it's interesting to me, uh, people don't need immediate access today, but they treasure responsiveness. So when I get back to somebody in, say, 90 minutes, they say, "My God, Alan, thank you so much. I really appreciate this." And for me, it's nothing. It's just part of my normal work habit. Uh, so you need confidence to say to yourself, "Okay, I can help this person. I can get back to them quickly without jeopardizing my day." Uh, And I want to do it rapidly, though, because you have to strike quickly in business. So let's just say we're all experts at what we do. And I always stipulate that people who come to me for coaching are expert at what they do, but that's not their problem. It's not for me to make them more expert in their content. It's for me to make them more expert in their processes and marketing. And the processes include speed and they include confidence.
Mm. What are some tips maybe you could give us on speaking with more confidence? You know,
Well, use social proof. And the easiest way, the best aid I can give you isn't to just say things that are theoretical and academic. You need to say things with social proof. So if I said to you, for example, one thing today about supply chains is that they're very long and they're vulnerable. And we see that more than ever today in the world. And people are like, oh, yeah, that's true, that's true. But if I say, Apple did an interesting thing last week. They shortened their supply chain from halfway around the world in China to the floor downstairs in their own offices because they're making their own chips, right? Um,
mhm.
that gets people's attention. And then I say, even in the professional services business, why can't you shorten your supply chain? Do you need a virtual assistant who, in fact, elongates your supply chain? And suddenly we're in a very important conversation. So, social proof, which is all around us, it's in the Wall Street Journal every day, is what can give us more confidence speaking. And then I would also say the true belief you're trying to help people. You're not trying to get smile sheets with tens and ovations and people slapping you on the back. You don't need that. All you're trying to do is help people and give them something they can use to improve their lives.
Oh, well said. I think one of the most important things I've ever learned from you is our number one job is to improve the client's condition.
That's right.
That's our most important thing. And people can feel that when you're really trying to help them and you care about results at the end of the day. And every leader who's listening to this can also, think about that. Your number one job is to improve the condition of
Well,
the
when people
organization, the
talk to me,
people.
they say to me, how can I raise my fees? I say, you're asking the wrong question. The question is, how can you raise your value? If you improve the client's condition, well, then you can raise your fees. But if you start with the fees, you're going to be seen as somebody who's just trying to sell something.
Oh, well said. Well said. Fourth Alanism, Occam's razor suggests that given the options, the simplest choice is usually the best.
Yeah, I'm a reductionist, and I believe that I need to make things simple for myself and also simple for other people. And I'm not saying simplistic, which is a different word. I'm saying simple, so that people don't get all hung up, tied up in their own machinations. Most things, not everything, but most things are simpler than people want them to be or think that they are. People want to make things elaborate because they think it gives them more gravitas, more credibility. And the fact is, if you looked on LinkedIn, I mean, LinkedIn to me is better than a comedy act. If you looked on LinkedIn, you find people saying the 7 qualifications of a good leader, the 12 mistakes leaders make, these 5 charts, where do you fall in these charts for leadership? No, no, no. You go, none of these people have ever led anything. You know, I've been with great leaders. I've been with governmental leaders and private sector leaders and entertainment leaders and sports leaders and so on. And they don't sit down and say, which of these 6 things should I do? They, from their gut and from their experience and their intelligence, they come up with things and they move rapidly. But they don't have a checklist or a litmus test that says, oh, gee, am I doing these 4 things? That's not how it works.
Well said. Well said. So they're looking for the one next right thing to do, and then they do it quickly.
Right. And if they do it wrong, they learn from it and they correct it and they do it better next time.
Oh, well said. Well said. Alanism number five, be absolutely fearless and never subordinate. And he went on some context here. I found that the key to startling success is to be fearless.
Well, I wrote a book called Fearless Leadership.
Mm,
And that's what I find that the best leaders are, even informal leaders. Let's say excellent athletes who motivate the rest of their team. They're not the manager or the coach, but they're excellent athletes, or excellent salespeople who form an exemplar for the rest of the team. You know this story, but I'll tell it for the recording here, and that is that uh, one of my biggest clients over the years was State Street Bank up here in the Northeast, large repository of securities and so forth, and a global entity. I was going to go around the world for them. They said, Alan, only you can do this, but the CEO has to approve this. So, this was, I figured out the monetary conversion. And today it would have been the equivalent of a $2 million deal just for
mm,
me.
mm,
And so I met with Marsh Carter, who was the CEO of State Street Bank, in this gigantic office. He was a military veteran. He was an officer. He had memorabilia hanging from the ceiling, on the walls, the whole business. His desk was like a soccer field, for God's sake. So I sat down and he says, "So you're the consultant?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, listen, under my watch," he says. Now that as soon as he said that, I knew where I was. But he said, "Under my watch, for the last 5 years, we've had an annual compound increase in profit of 22%. It's a record for the industry. No one's ever done it. Why do we need you?" Now, if I took even 5 seconds and said and thought about this, or if I said, "Well, Mr. Carter, nobody can equal what you did, but we can always," I'm done. I'm out the money. But I said to him, within a second, "How do you know it shouldn't have been 34%?" And he looked at me, just stared at me, and he said, "You're hired." Now, I've done equivalent kinds of things many times because what people don't understand is you look at an upside and a downside. I said I'm a reductionist, and people overestimate the downside and underestimate the upside. So I had nothing to lose. I mean, if he said no, I didn't have, a couple of $1 million. I didn't have anyway, right at the moment. But I still had the State Street account and I still had other business. But if he says yes at his position, nobody's going to quarrel about the money. I mean, that's it. And what could I lose when he said under my watch? I knew this was an ego thing. And so I gave him an opportunity that where he could have retired in another 2 years, which he was going to do anyway, with even a better record. So uh, I don't know that that's fearless so much in terms of bravery. My father was a paratrooper. He was brave. But it's fearless in terms of not worrying about your ego, which I talked about before, letting it be smashed, but relying on your self-esteem and understanding, hey, I'm a worthy person and I'm going to tell him what I think.
Yeah. Anyone who's listened to this, put yourself in Alan's shoes and ask yourself, could I have said that? Could I have made that statement? I think that's a really great fear test right there. How fearless are you? Um, I love your mental model of looking at the downside and the upside there, and looking at the risk. Um, and I think, you've really taught me this over the years about being a contrarian also, because most people would not have done that. And to your point, if you would have gave a stock vanilla answer to him, he would have ignored you, correct?
Well, he would have ignored me. He would have, bid me goodbye. And if you ask yourself what's in the best interest of the client, people come to me all the time in a coaching relationship. How can I do this? How can I raise my fees? Ask yourself what's in the best interest of the client. Fees are based on value. If you just try to raise your fees, you'll be seen as a salesperson. But if you provide more value, you're advancing the interests of the client. And in this case, I realized this was a big, important project that the team had put me up for. So it was very important to the bank, important to the board, important to the CEO. And so this could really advance their interests. And consequently, I just proved that I was a guy.
Mm. This segues nicely into number six. The first sale is to yourself.
I don't know that this is going to surprise anyone, but too many people are sitting across the desk wondering if they're worthy. It's a stereotypical imposter syndrome. And by the way, I think it was Dr. Rose Clance, I want to say, in around 1984, wrote The Imposter Phenomenon, or a book like that. And she interviewed executives and sports figures and entertainment figures all over, and she found that 84% of them found that they didn't deserve to be where they are. They were positive somebody would find them out as an imposter. Now, you and I are sitting here about 3 days from the Oscars. And some of these actors are notoriously insecure because they get rewarded for being someone other than who they really are. And so you'll see an actor holding an Oscar and the pictures are being taken. And while the pictures are being taken and everyone's congratulating them, they're really worried about whether they'll ever work again. So the imposter syndrome is pretty damn bad. And the problem is you expose it. You let it affect your behaviors while you're sitting with the buyer. So instead of asking yourself and stressing and wasting energy on, do I deserve to be here? You really should be asking yourself, how can I best help this person? But if you don't get to that because you're too worried about trying to help yourself out of the pit here first, it's not good.
Well said. Number seven, and this is something I use on a weekly basis, sometimes even daily, this question. How can I get there fastest and easiest?
Well, that was Occam's theory, and a good example of this. I talk about social proof is that the legend was that whoever could unravel the Gordian knot would rule Asia. And so Alexander the Great happens by, and they show him the knot. No one's ever been able to unravel it. So he takes out his sword and he cuts it in half. And he went on to rule Asia. And Alexander said, well, wait a minute, what's the objective here? The objective is to open the knot. So why unravel it? I can just cut it out with my sword. You have to be able to think outside the box, or in this case, outside the knot, right? So I think that's the beauty of it. I think that we have to be original and we have to think in ways that aren't bounded by what's gone on before. Too often we try to do what's already been done better. I call that conformist innovation. So Uber is really a taxi service on steroids. But non-conformist innovation is Amazon, which started as a book distributor and now is delivering food and medical supplies and God knows what, sometimes by drone, and often the same day order it. So we have plenty of social proof around us.
Mm. Number 8, if you don't blow your own horn, there is no music. And I've shared this a lot of times, and everyone always chuckles and they never forget it.
Once every 2 weeks, I do a live video on social media with a woman named Leanne Hughes, who's in Australia. So it's morning her time and evening my time. And she's one of my clients for quite a while. And the show is called um, Talk the Walk. So everybody talks in their great, esteem about walking the talk. You've got to demonstrate things. So you've got to be an exemplar. So if you tell people the customer comes first, then you got to show that the customer is first with you. Okay, that's true. But there's another side to that. There's a reciprocal, which is talking the walk. You got to tell people what you've done. Not everybody knows what you've done or how you've done it or why you've done it. And so you have to tell people, listen, we're giving this customer an exception. We're going to let them return this, and we're going to give them full credit because I believe there's a long-term potential here, and we should honor that for the good of the customer and the good of the business. And now people have not just knowledge of how to do this, but the fact that you are rewarding this kind of behavior. And nobody in organizations, nobody, and I've been doing this for 40 years, believes what they're told or what they read or what they hear. They only believe what they see.
Mm.
So you have to show them. And that's not just walking the talk, it's also talking the walk so people are informed.
Mm. Now, someone listening to this might be afraid that this is arrogant to blow your own horn. And you talk about this in your book and some of your other books about walking up to that line of that confidence and arrogance. And there's a difference, and it's okay. You got to give yourself permission to toot your own horn, number one. But can you talk about that confidence, arrogance line
Well,
where people might be afraid?
here are my definitions. Confidence is the honest to God belief you can help other people. And I said earlier, confidence means that you can meet others' expectations, whether or not you've done it before. Arrogance is the belief that you have nothing left to learn yourself. Along the way, before, after, doesn't matter. Smugness is arrogance without the talent. And we meet a lot of smug people. Well, that's not how you do this. Really? Have you ever done it? So, um, the confident ski instructor, he goes up the hill with you and demonstrates 6 yards ahead how to bend the knees and traverse and use the upper edge of the skis and so forth. The arrogant ski instructor goes up and starts that way, but then zooms way the hell ahead of you and waits for you, down the hill. The smug ski instructor sits in the chalet with a brandy and says, when you go up there the next morning, do these three things. So which kind of ski instructor do you want? I want the guy who's 6 yards ahead of me. And we see this all the time. And, confidence gets a bad rap because it's too often confused with arrogance. And the fact is that if you skate over the line every so often, it's almost like hockey in the blue line. As long as you pull your skate back, you're okay. You're on sides.
Mm. Number 9, no guilt, no fear, no peer. And you've talked about my mantra is no guilt, no fear, no peer. So I walk into a room and I own it.
Yeah, a woman asked me, she's been with me for about 10 years. She makes seven figures easily every year. And she's just a brilliant consultant. And she said to me once in a coaching session, so listen, what's the real secret here? What drives you? Why are you so confident? And I said, well, no guilt, no fear, no fear. Guilt and fear mask talent. So my feeling is if you're guilty, and we all are at times, in that we make mistakes. My fault, I made a mistake. Mea culpa. You apologize if it's possible. You can't apologize to a dead parent, right? But you can apologize to most people. Then you can try to fix it, either with your actions or payment or something, and then you move on. So uh, you don't have guilt, and you don't allow people to guilt you, because that creates distress. Um, Fear is paralyzing, and so we talk about fight or flight, but there's also fright. And the deer caught in the headlights is capable of running away, but it's so frightened it can't move. And I don't get frightened. That's the no, that's the fearless thing we talked about earlier. I don't get frightened. I might say the wrong thing. I might not be as effective as I'd like to be. I might make an error, but I'm not frightened. I don't kill myself. I don't undermine myself. And then no peer. I walk into a room, I own it. If you're better than I am, prove it. But that could be with 4 people or 2,000 people. But I'm well read. I'm well versed in world events. I read the Wall Street Journal every day. I have significant intellectual resources behind me. And so while I don't hit people over the head with that, I don't try to hide it either.
And when you walk in a room like you own it, it's because you've done the push-ups in terms
Well,
of research and writing and
yes and no. It's because I stay in the moment. I mean, ironically, people prepare too much. I empty my mind. I want to stay in the moment and deal with what's on this person's mind. Even when I do role plays with my clients, they're worried about what I might say in 30 seconds. They're worried about where they want to go or how to keep the conversation on track. Instead of listening to me when I'm throwing up a softball, they ask me a question. I say, listen, I'm sorry I can't tell you right away what's bothering me because I've been distracted by our attrition problem, but it's probably this, our financing is not good. And people miss the attrition problem because it's a throwaway, because they're not in the moment. So it's really a matter of having the confidence to be focused on what the other person's saying and stop trying to run a script through the interaction.
mm. And you've talked about really being a reality seeker because I've asked you about mentors before and you say you're really mostly a reality seeker. Can you talk about that? I mean, you just observe what's going on and you make
Yeah, you look around you and you come up uh, with every example you can possibly need. When every year we go to Nantucket and this house on the beach, and at 6 in the morning I'll be out on there's a studio in there, a den in there, and I'll be writing, my latest book or an article. And I watched for a long time. The robins would come down at sunrise, and they'd be pulling worms out of the ground. And I said at first, well, there's the old aphorism, the early bird gets the worm. But then I realized something else. The early worm gets eaten. So you have to look around and put some meaning into things. As you and I have been talking, I have big windows here overlooking the backyard of the house, about 2 acres, maybe acre and a half. And there's a gigantic wild turkey walking around there. Now, these things can fly, and my dogs are in the house. But I mean, this is the biggest wild turkey I've ever seen. And wild turkeys are endemic to this area. But the thing about it that I find interesting is that it's alone. And these turkeys are always in flocks, always. And so I'm wondering, back in my mind when we're done, why is this turkey out there alone? Is it casing the joint for the rest of the flock and its family? Or has it been rejected? Has it been ostracized? I think about these things because there are always parallels I can make in business.
Mm. And if you can make it memorable like that, people remember it.
It's exactly right because they can identify with these things. They've seen a lone seagull instead of a seagull that's in a flock, which you usually see.
Mm.
They see other things that are always alone, that don't join. And so we tend to make connections in terms of how we lead our lives.
Mm. Number 10, nobody wants a humble consultant, attorney, or surgeon.
Yeah, well, this is the humility thing I talked about, and nobody screams, listen, get me a humble surgeon for this operation. Because what you want is a surgeon who thinks he or she is God. I can heal anyone. I can do anything. Don't worry about it. I got this. That's what you want. You want an attorney in a courtroom who says, we're going to crush him. Not somebody who says, we ought to settle. We're going to crush him. Don't worry about it. And you want a consultant who says, Yeah, I can help you with this. Sure, I can.
Mm.
Uh, Powerful people love power. People who seek improvement want people who give aura, who give feelings of safety and improvement. And there is uh, there is a presence, I'll call it, that people have where other people simply take faith and they say, this person's presence is such that I believe in them. His presence is such that I can invest in this person. I believe in him. And that's what we have to create. Not a slide deck, which is the stupidest thing in the world. Not some kind of script, never cold calling. It's creating value by merely communicating with people.
I have two more bonus Alanisms here, so we'll actually have $1.2 million advice minimum on this episode. The first one is assume permission that our mutual friend Marshall Goldsmith, you wrote a book with him, assume permission. Can you talk about that one?
Yeah, Marshall and I wrote Life Storming together, and Uh, I came up with a piece of intellectual property with four permission points, sort of a gauge or a meter. One is no permission. And so, in other words, I have no permission to do anything unless I'm granted permission. And I'm not moving, I'm not making a decision unless I'm told I can do it, right? And so, probably uh, you're going to listen to authority in certain extreme circumstances. But in other cases, we simply surrender permission and we simply sit there when we shouldn't. The second is um, limited permission. I will ask for permission to see if I can do this. And the third position is um, uh, I will situational permission. I will grant myself permission. I think it's safe without asking. And then the fourth is blanket permission. I'll do anything. So I'll give you two quick examples. The generic example is that you rush to the airport. You dash from the airline lounge to the airline line to get on the plane on the jetway. You've neglected to go to the restroom. You say, no problem, I'll go on the plane. The plane takes off, and it's one of these pilots who believes you leave the seatbelt sign on until you retire. And so, uh, in first class in particular, the flight attendant sits right next to the lavatory, and people are saying, I'm afraid if I get up with the seatbelt on, she will announce, the idiot in seat 3A has gotten up with the seatbelt sign on, will have to return to New York. I'm sorry, this will cost you 5 hours, right? Um, However, somebody in first class eventually gets up with a seatbelt sign on because, it's an emergency, if that person, and they go into the restroom and they come out and nothing has happened. The flight attendant's busy, looking at her nails or something. And consequently, then everybody goes up there because that first person has enabled them to take permission. And we often look for that when we don't need to look for it. Now, you can't take blanket permission all the time. If you're in New York waiting to see a play and you cut into the line to get into the theater, you'll be killed. So you have to use your head about this. The other example I wanted to give you was I was in Houston to see a client. It was 100 degrees, 100% humidity. They try to tell you it's dry heat, which means, small animals explode on the sidewalk. So I parked in the parking garage and I had to cross the street to the client. And at the curb, it says don't walk. And there were four or five people there. And we're all melting into the sidewalk. It's sweltering. So I look to this is Houston. I look to my right and you can see like New Mexico. And I look to my left and you can see Louisiana. And so I walked across the street. I'm a New Yorker. And the people began castigating me. They kept yelling at me the don't walk sign is on. I don't give a damn, right? There was no traffic coming. There's no cop standing there. I'm getting into my client before I have dehydration. So we have to use our judgment about claiming permission, no matter what the norms are.
Well said. Lastly, last Alanism, treat yourself well after a loss. And the context of that was you go out and you try to make a sale or do something, attempt it, you don't succeed, and it was treat yourself well after a loss.
Yeah, don't extend your misery. There's no law that says you have to keep beating yourself.
Mhm.
Jesus said to turn the other cheek. He never said to let them keep hitting you. And so you should do something to brighten your spirits. Now, if you have a support system, a family, colleagues, they can help you do that. But if you don't, or they neglect to do it, do it yourself. Go out and get a good meal, take an afternoon off, go for a swim, play with the dogs, do something. It's not the end of the world. You have to isolate negative. So all it means is on that day, in that place with this person, They didn't buy from me. So what? Get on with your life.
Mhm. Well said. And lastly, what are some of your favorite pieces of overall advice? Alan just celebrated an 80th birthday, and he is better than ever in my experience, and sharper and just at the top of his game every time we talk, better than ever. What are some of your favorite pieces of life advice you would give to someone?
Well, I'll give you two, one profound, one really great. The profound one is Matsuo Basho. He said somewhere in the 15th century, uh, don't walk in the footsteps of men of old, seek what they sought. And I say today, life is not a search for meaning. Life's about creating meaning. And then the final thing I'll tell you is that Dizzy Dean, the great erratic baseball pitcher, said, if you can do it, it ain't bragging.
Mm, there it is. Alan, where can people find you? The book is Seven Figure Consultant. Excellent. Highly recommend it. This will be the 13th book I've read by Alan. They're all great. Where can people find you and how can they work with you?
AlanWeiss.com, AlanWeiss.com. Lots of free, as you know, video, audio, text resources on my site. All of my coaching opportunities, the ways to work with me directly one-on-one are there, as well as my newsletters and every day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I have a minute with Alan on all the social media and Spotify, wherever these things go. They're also archived on my blog on my site. And then starting this coming Monday, we're recording this on a Friday, there'll be another series, an additional series every day of a minute called Alan at 80. And so I invite you to participate. No charge.
Oh, beautiful. Well, thank you for this, Alan. Three-time guest. I appreciate it. Um, Probably 20 pieces of $100,000 advice in there. And if you really stop and think everything Alan's talked about and you really apply it to your life and your work, these are really six-figure pieces of advice. I mean, if you take them seriously and you do apply them. So again, thank you for everything, Alan. One of the best investments I've ever made is working with you. And Alan's not paying me to say that. I've paid him to say that over the years. So I highly recommend your work, no matter what any listeners do, and your life will be better because of it. So great to see you, and looking forward to the next conversation.
Thanks, AJ. Be well.
Thanks.